When you think about revolutionary ideas, things like equality, human dignity, where do they usually come from? Maybe a political manifesto, right? Well, what if I told you some of the most radical ideas came from a 2,000-year-old guide to family life? Today, we're going to look at the ancient household codes from the book of Ephesians. On the surface, they look like simple advice for the home, but hiding inside them was an idea so radical, it was set to challenge the very foundation of the ancient world.
But, to really get why this was so groundbreaking, we have to rewind a bit. We've got to understand what normal looked like back then. So let me ask you this. In the first century Roman Empire, what do you think held a family together? What was the fundamental glue?
The answer? It's pretty straightforward and, honestly, a little stark. It was all about absolute power. Everything from the emperor way up top, right down to the family unit, was built on this super rigid, unshakable hierarchy. The whole world just ran on command and control.
Okay, so let's actually step into that world for a minute. Because if you want to feel the shock of just how new these ideas were, you've got to get a feel for the old way of doing things. What was it actually like inside a typical Roman home?
Well, the power structure was just absolute. At the very top, you had the father, the pater familias, and he had literal life and death authority over every single person in the household. Wives, very few legal rights. Children were basically subjects, not individuals. And slaves, they were seen as property, no different than a cow or a piece of furniture. And this wasn't some fringe idea. This was the unquestioned reality for millions of people.
All right, so get that picture locked in your head, this rigid, top-down world. Got it? Good. Because now we're going to pivot to this text from Ephesians, and it introduces one single core command that just blows up that entire foundation. It challenges literally everything we just talked about.
And here it is, the big idea, mutual submission. Just think about that for a second. Forget the one-way street of power, where everything flows from the top down. This introduces a totally different dynamic. It's a two-way street. It's about honoring and deferring to each other.
So, what does that actually mean in practice? Well, it was a command for everyone. Yeah, you heard that right. Husband, wife, parent, child, master, slave, every single person was now called to honor and submit to one another. So the motivation is no longer fear of the guy above you on the ladder. It's this shared mutual respect. And that completely changes what holds the whole thing together.
Okay, so how does this actually play out? Let's get practical. The very first relationship the text tackles is marriage, and it basically flips it from being about power to being about partnership.
And the shift here it's huge. In the normal Roman way of thinking, the husband had authority, the wife had a duty to obey. Simple as that. It was basically a power transaction. But this new Christian ethic, it just completely flips the script. It reframes the entire idea of marriage around self-giving love and, you guessed it, mutual respect.
And this next point is absolutely crucial. The text doesn't just get rid of the idea of male headship. Instead, it completely redefines it. So instead of meaning domination or having control over someone, the source tells us it's now modeled on the Messiah's love. And what kind of love is that? It's a love that's all about giving of yourself, about sacrifice. So the person in authority is now commanded to act, not for their own good, but for the good of the other person. That is a total 180 from the Roman idea of power.
But here's the thing. This new way of thinking didn't just stop with husbands and wives. No way. It went all the way down the ladder to the most powerless, the most voiceless people in that household. And it gave them something revolutionary: dignity, a new sense of human worth.
The source material we're looking at literally calls this a revolutionary concept in the ancient world. And you might be asking, why? What's so revolutionary? Well, it's all about who these instructions were for.
Just think about this for a second. For what might be the very first time, children are being spoken to directly, as if they're responsible human beings who can make real moral choices. But even more shocking, and this is the big one, so are slaves. In a world that saw them as property, as tools, this text addresses them as people with moral agency, as human beings with dignity who are accountable for their choices. That was just unheard of back then.
Okay, so let's pull all these pieces together. Why does any of this matter today? What's the big takeaway here? It's that these instructions, they were never just about making home life a little nicer. No, this was a full-blown ethical revolution.
You can literally watch the whole ethical framework just transform right before your eyes. Rigid hierarchy, that gives way to mutual submission. Power and authority replaced by love and sacrifice. And maybe most important of all, people as property? Nope. Now it's people as persons, each one with their own dignity and their own moral worth.
So here's the bottom line. These ancient household codes were never ever just a list of how-to tips for your home. They were a blueprint for a completely new and honestly pretty subversive social vision. They were a direct challenge to the core power structures of the entire Roman world. And they did it not with an open rebellion, but by changing things from the inside out, starting with the most fundamental building block of society, the family.
And that really leaves us with something to think about, right? Here we are, 2,000 years later. How do these ancient ideas about dignity, about mutual respect, how do they still shape or maybe even challenge how we think about our own relationships today?